Hello, I'm Leonard Maltin. After making westerns for 30 years, I'm sure it was tough for John Wayne to find new and interesting ideas. But having enjoyed success with a boisterous comedic adventure called North to Alaska, the notion of doing something else in a lighthearted vein appealed to him. And the result was a slapstick variation on Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew, set in the Old West, with one of his favorite leading ladies, Maureen O'Hara, in the co-starring role. It was called McLintock. Michael Wayne took the producer's reins on this film and surrounded his father with compatible colleagues on both sides of the camera. Andrew McLaughlin had been an assistant director on many of Wayne's movies, including Sands of Iwo Jima, Island in the Sky, The High and the Mighty, and John Ford's The Quiet Man, which co-starred Andrew's father, Victor McLaughlin. He directed his first features for Wayne's Batjack company, Gun the Man Down and Man in the Vault, and then became a prolific director of television westerns like Gunsmoke, Have Gun Will Travel, and Rawhide. McLintock was his biggest feature film assignment to date, and he didn't let Wayne or anyone else down. Wayne's favorite screenwriter, James Edward Grant, provided the story and screenplay for McLintock, which was short on subtlety but full of crowd-pleasing entertainment. And cinematographer William Clothier, who shot most of Wayne's westerns in the 50s and 60s, was perched behind the camera during production in and around Tucson, Arizona. The continuing potency of his name and image all these decades later says a great deal about that connection to the movie-going public. John Wayne's oldest son, Michael, had been at his side on a number of film locations, but on McLintock, he took on a new responsibility as the film's producer. In this segment, we'll learn more about Michael's career behind the camera and his stewardship of the company known as Batjack.
Batjack was saved by Michael, who brought them all into this century and had to fight like hell sometimes to get it done.
He was the kind of man he was because of his mother and father. And it just happened that his father was John Wayne.
My dad is the oldest of John Wayne's 7 children. Obviously, there was a great interest in my dad because of who his father was, but separately, on his own, people had a great deal of respect for him just in who he was and the kind of producer he was, and he earned his stripes the hard way like his father did.
His dad very much wanted him to go to the Naval Academy, and Michael said, I don't necessarily want to go to the Naval Academy, and his father said, well, boy, if I had that chance, I would have given anything to go. And Michael said, I think I'll be going to law school. As it turned out, he got more involved in the business each summer.
When kids were going to summer camp and things like that, and I was going away on location to visit my father, I could see that people were very, very interested in that and almost a little envious. And of course, it was a great thrill for me because he did a lot of films. You know, he did over 152 films, and so he worked most of the time, and it was always outdoors in some exciting, adventurous place, and it was really fun to go there and visit him.
Yeah, as a kid, he came down on Hondo. I remember Duke saying, now listen, you better just train him how to behave. I said, look, I don't have to do that. Listen, he's smart.
His father asked him to do more and more things, particularly about the age he started to graduate from college. It was at that time he thought, you know, I probably don't want to follow a law career. I'm involved with the motion picture company. I like it.
The Duke made sure that Michael, if he was going to be in this business, would learn from the bottom up.
He started bringing in coffee, he started making deliveries.
Then he became a script clerk, I think, an assistant, second assistant director, then an assistant director, and then he worked at other studios as a production manager, and then gradually came into the business.
In 1960, Batjack Productions produced John Wayne's dream project, The Alamo. It was a successful film, but Batjack was carrying the load for several smaller, less profitable films made in previous years. Michael Wayne became president of the company in 1961, and he worked hard for the next 2 years consolidating the business. Meanwhile, his father worked on other studio films until 1963. With son Michael producing and assistant director turned director Andy McLaughlin, Duke starred in a smash hit that filled the company's coffers, McLintock.
I never really was interested in being in front of the camera, but being behind the camera and producing that, I'm doing what I was really interested in. If John Wayne wasn't my father, I mean, how else would I have had an opportunity to produce a major motion picture? Actually, McLintock was the first film that I produced with him.
When he took over the company, it was not in good shape financially. And my dad, over the next several years, really turned it around and really just kind of made it a machine in terms of putting out good products and bringing in a substantial revenue.
Following the runaway success of McLintock, John Wayne had to take time off to deal with cancer. He fought it and won. And in 1966, he was ready to work. Michael found an opportunity for Batjack to make another epic film.
The movie was called Cast the Giant Shadow. Its principal character was an American who went to Israel during the 1948 conflict. And I told him about the story, and I said, I think it's a story that would appeal to your dad. So he said, let's go up and see Duke. And Duke was stretched out on a couch, and he said, have Shavelson come up here and read the damn thing to me. So anyway, we go up, and Mel is reading this thing, and his hands are trembling. Read about 10 pages. And Duke says to Mike, get Kirk Douglas. Then he says to Michael, get Sinatra. Now we have John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, Frank Sinatra. It's beginning to be a pretty impressive cast. And Michael says, what do we do now, Pop? He says, what we do now is get about $5 or $6 million to make the picture. And Michael was sort of like the little boy in the candy store that afternoon.
Michael Wayne was the son of John Wayne in many, many ways. He had the talent, he had the temperament, he had the heart, and he had the love of his family and people.
It was like having a big brother that would never desert you.
You always knew that he would be there for you, and that you know, if you needed something, you could go to him. You know, you might not always like the answer, but he was there, and he cared about all of us, and he would never really let you down.
And I think he inherited courage and strength and a sense of fairness.
He was terribly faithful and loyal to his friends.
He really led by example, you know, and that was so evident in spending time with him, to see how he engaged with people, how he treated people, and how he was honest and how he was fair.
He's tough to get in touch with. He's tough to make a deal with. But if you make a deal, you had a deal, and all it took was a handshake.
I think Mike made a good producer just being around his dad and discussing things with his dad, having to make decisions. Mike made all the money deals with the actors, made all the money deals with the directors.
He was a great businessman. Michael, I think, took more delight in reading a 50-page contract than a 50-page screen treatment. I mean, he knew everything about every item in that deal, and nothing escaped him.
In this business, you know, you have to make a good deal financially, and you have to make a good film. You have to have both of those to make money. You can make a good film that makes money, and then have a bad deal and you don't make any money.
He had a terrific reputation as a producer. All the movies that he executive produced came in under budget. And there was a time, I don't know the particular studio, but I know there were several that were considering him to run their studio. I think he was flattered, but he chose to work with his dad, and he wanted to work with his dad.
In 1968, Batjack embarked on its most expensive production to date, The Green Berets. The film was controversial, but Wayne was willing to take a stand. And it came from his heart as a tribute, like the Alamo, to patriotism and American ideals as he saw them.
He was Duke's man. You know, if you wanted something, you went to Michael. You didn't have to bother Duke to go to Michael, and Michael would either clear it or he'd say, you know what, we can't do that.
The father-son thing is tough enough, but when your father is one of the giants in the world, it's much more difficult. It's true, they would battle. but not to the point of out of control battle, you know. It's always about how do we make a good picture, and you don't know how, and I do, and then it would get into it.
You know, my dad worked so hard, and it didn't happen overnight, that, you know, over a period of time, he gained my grandfather's respect. When they were doing movies, they had a very business-like relationship.
From 1970 to 1975, Michael produced 4 westerns and 2 police dramas for his father.
My father was in the office and the phone rang. It was Henry Hathaway. I said, before you answer that phone, I have a book here called True Grit. He says, well, what's it about? I said, well, here it is. Take it home, read it. It was a very thin book, unpublished western. And he read it, brought it back the next day, threw it on my desk. He said, I hope you get it. I said, why? He says, well, I don't care who gets it. I'm going to play the part. So anyway, I got into a bidding war, and of course, I lost, and Paramount and Hal Wallace got it. My father did get the part. He worked for less on that picture than he did for me, and I said to him, why don't you work for me for $500,000 and take a percentage of the profits instead of Hal Wallace? He said, because Hal Wallace is a better producer than you. So, you know, you always knew where you stood with him.
I know my grandfather was quoted saying about my dad, he runs a tight ship. So, and knowing my dad, I think he was in charge from the first day till the last day, and I don't think there was any gray area.
Duke said to me, he says, I guess Michael's becoming a real filmmaker, isn't he? I said, Duke, he always knew. He knew how to make movies. Not many people do.
Shortly after completing The Shootist in 1976, John Wayne had to fight cancer once again, and ultimately he lost this battle. He asked his beloved son and trusted partner to continue the fight in his name.
You know, being around his dad and being a part of Bat Jack, and when his dad passed on, he was Bat Jack.
When his dad was ill at UCLA, one of the doctors, Donald Morton, came to see him and said, gee, you know, we're thinking of building a cancer institute here, and we'd really like to name it after you.
He was flattered, and so he said to my dad, if I live, you know, I'll do everything I can. If I don't pull through this, try to support them and help them however you can. And so it was a promise my dad took to heart.
He knew that the only thing that was going to cure cancer was research. And we were heavily involved with cancer research. It was, you know, something that Michael felt, well, if he could do anything, this is what he would want to do. See that his father's name was associated with something of the caliber of this kind of research.
They were growing rapidly. I mean, it was just terrific. And it came time to expand. And my dad said, you know what, we can go to a community hospital and survive. And a lot of people said, no, you can't. That's crazy. That's not going to happen. You know, but he had a vision, and he said, well, we're going to do it, and we'll make it work. And they did. That's when they went over to St. John's and became the John Wayne Cancer Institute.
He was a very hands-on guy. This took a tremendous amount of his time. A tremendous amount. There were always meetings, there were always appearances, there was always something.
He devoted 90% of his time to the John Wayne Cancer Clinic, and he really stopped fooling around with movies.
I think that his biggest task of all was, after his father passed on, to take care of the Wayne Enterprises.
Michael conceived the idea with his father that they would license the name and likeness and create a company called Wayne Enterprises, whose sole purpose was to license John Wayne products.
What we do as a family, we license, I would say, limited edition male collectibles. It could be knives, guns, fine art prints, bronze sculptures. We charge a royalty when we license these products, and the money that comes in then goes to support the John Wayne Cancer Institute, which is a leading-edge cancer treatment and research facility here in Los Angeles.
He said to me, I think it's terrific that by using John Wayne, you know, with this Cancer Institute, you know, we can do good. We can make people's lives better that are battling cancer. That's pretty amazing.
The thing that John Wayne was remembered most for is his courage. And when people are facing cancer, that's a great image. And that was the image he let us share.
And in addition to that, he did go ahead with restoring the movies.
One of the problems, there was damage to the negatives of the film. And I think when he discovered that there'd been a leak in one of our film vaults and they were in water, he just sort of put his hands up and thought, I have to deal with this another day, because he was the head of Wayne Enterprises, and then he was also the chairman of the board of the John Wayne Cancer Institute at St. John's Health Center. After Michael died, it was so hard to figure what to do from day to day. So I thought, I know what Michael wanted to do. I know how he wanted to do it. So I thought, I'm going to get those films restored. He'd done Hondo and McClintock. He was waiting to do High and the Mighty and Island in the Sky. So I thought, I'm going to just get into this. And that's when I decided this is what I'm going to do.
There was like three components: Wayne Enterprise, the Cancer Institute, and Bat Jack Productions, all of which my dad ran. Wayne Enterprise, my dad formed in cooperation with his brothers and sisters. That's now being run by my uncle Ethan Wayne. And then, as I said, my dad was the chairman of the board of the John Wayne Cancer Institute, and Patrick Wayne is doing that now. And then Bat Jack Production is being run by my mom.
Where Michael did 3 jobs, it takes 3 of us to do. Yeah. He was able to do it all.
The legacy of a Michael Wayne is the fact that, you think that, because you're the son of somebody that you can just kind of breeze and walk through. Michael went way beyond that. He took an entity that was big and made it huge. And it will go on and on forever because of Michael Wayne.
Working with Michael Wayne was a pleasure. Michael Wayne was one of the most genuine human beings I've ever met.
He was a particularly loving person. And if he was proud of you or liked you or respected you, there wasn't anything in this world he wouldn't do for you.
It's a pal, and they're hard to find. I don't have a replacement for Michael. I have friends, but not that kind of a friend.
I don't think you'll have another John Wayne, and you won't have another Michael Wayne. I was really blessed.
There will be nobody ever in my lifetime like him, ever.
2 of John Wayne's female co-stars have vivid memories of making McClintock. His most frequent leading lady, Maureen O'Hara, and then up-and-coming actress, Stephanie Powers.
When I read the script, I was thrilled. I thought, by God, they wrote this for the 2 of us.
And just as I was taking my position to ride into the shot, I see himself coming over to me. And I thought, oh my God, this is the moment. He's going to tell me something. He's going to impart some wonderful wisdom to me about acting or about, how we can do this better or what have you. And he rolled over as he would roll, He rolled over and he rolled up to me and he took a long look at me and he said, just remember, kid, it's all in the eyes. And he turned around and rolled away. So that was my John Wayne acting class. It's all in the eyes. And he was right. Of course he was right.
Michael Wayne, Duke's son, said Maureen was the only one who could stand up to my father, stand toe-to-toe with him and match him in everything. And to have Duke's kids feel that way was kind of nice.
Bigger than life, as you would imagine John Wayne to be, and as you would imagine his aura, he created a big wave and we were all in the wake, So it was a very big wave that he created.
In Arkansas, I knew some of the top theater men, and they said that they kept the movie going for weeks and weeks and weeks because they couldn't provide enough seats for the public who wanted to see it, that they loved McLintock.
What I remember most of all is the loyalty that emanated from that experience. For years and years later, whenever we would run into each other, it was special. We had a special bond. It was not just, oh, you know, we had a nice movie, how are you? It was much stronger. Everybody was meant to feel a part of something. And therefore there was more than just acting colleagues. There was always this kind of like family feeling. And I don't think that that exists anymore.
I think people feel the same today as they've always felt. And I think it'll be just as successful as it always was, because you lived through the arguments between them, hoping for them to get together again, wondering how in God's name they're going to do it. And then when you see that look in Duke's eye, when he lifted his eyebrows and looked, you thought, uh-oh, here it comes, here it comes. And they've waited all the time in the theater for that to happen. Where could you find anything better than John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara?
John Wayne helped to invent the modern fight scene in his B-westerns of the 1930s, along with stuntman Yakima Canutt. But there was never a brawl quite like the one in McLintock. Let's take a closer look with some people who know a bit about movie fights and stunt work.
I happened to be fortunate enough to be at Warner Brothers for about 17 years during those times of Sunset Strip and Maverick and Lawman. And
I know of Czech Roberson. He did all of Wayne's movies. I came in a little bit late. I never worked with him, but he's famous. I mean, he's legendary.
Your presence there, like a Hayward or a Roberson or a Cliff Lyons, all these guys, Yakima Canutt, these people that were there, when they set up a sequence, they set it up with the actor in mind. And when it got to the point that, yes, you could really get yourself hurt, then that's when we basically stepped in. When you set something up or a part of something, you do it with your good friend in mind. I think when Roberson or Hayward or whoever was doubling Wayne at the same time, when they stepped on a horse, they kind of did it with Wayne in mind.
I think that I've had probably more fun doing the basics, fights and falls and things like that, where you actually have the chance to be kind of creative.
What's the stuntman's credo? Dialogue hell, let's wreck something.
I have a wonderful still of me hanging on the ladder as the ladder was being hauled up, and Duke was up at my head, and a wonderful stuntman called Red Morgan had his hand under my rear end, and he said, "You damn fool, get down, you're going to kill yourself." And I said, well, it's a little late to be telling me that as they're hauling me up. So they hauled me up. I did the stunt. After I fell in the water trough and I stood up to climb out, I thought Duke is going to say, "Great, Maureen, wonderful." But instead he said, "You didn't get your hair wet." I was ready to suck him in the nose, but I didn't. Afterwards he told me he was thrilled, but scared to death when I did it.
I think our presence on the set makes the set feel comfortable. They know because you're there, it's going to be safe. Now, can things happen? Certainly they can happen. That's the human element. And if something is really, really wrong, they can kind of foresee that maybe we can change that around just a little bit, still give the director what he wants, because after all, we're there to complement the director, not to direct. Does that mean that they never get...
It is that she gives the impression that's what she wanted all along. We learn that they really do love each other.
Happy day!
I don't think women will ever give up the corset completely.